Florida, Georgia, some added final thoughts here because, boy, you guys lit up the comment section. There's been a lot of talk back and forth. There always is the week of this game. It's one of the games that I look forward to every year, but not just on the SEC schedule, but on the college football schedule in general. So I'm doing a radio hit earlier today. And as Colin is showing you the game capsule here, Georgia favored by 4 in Vegas. We already gave you our prediction. We think the wrong team is favored. We like Florida to cover, and we like Florida to win outright. And let's say that were to happen. I was asked doing a radio hit earlier today in the Carolinas, would this shift the balance of power in the SEC East? What does a Florida win do? Does it shift the balance of power? Now, sometimes that's a little hyperbolic, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you can actually, 5 years down the road, look back on one outcome, and you can say, hey, this entire dynamic, whether it be a rivalry, an entire conference, this entire dynamic, and the reason it is the way it is now, it shifted that day. You can point to one moment in time. I think back a generation ago. Think about this Florida team playing Alabama in the SEC title game in 2009. Saban beats Meyer. That's the beginning of the Alabama dynasty and run to multiple national championships, the beginning of the end for the Florida run under Urban Meyer. So, like, that's one moment in time you can point to. So I was asked earlier today, is that going to be the case with Florida, Georgia? So it could be. I mean, if they beat Georgia, it could be, but you will not have the answer to that question Saturday one way or the other. I don't care if Florida wins 38-10. You won't have any answer about a shift of balance of power. Because if it only takes one game to shift a balance of power, then the balance of power is not all that strong to begin with, in my opinion. But one game can do it. The question with Florida is, what do they do with the win? Do they go and lose another game down the stretch and make themselves irrelevant in the college football playoff conversation before they ever go to Atlanta, let's say? Or do they go to Atlanta and play an ultra-competitive game with Alabama, maybe beat Alabama, and go to the college football playoff, if that's what they do with it, and then they reap the benefit on the recruiting trail, well, then all of a sudden, you can entertain this a lot more. And speaking of recruiting, it's a huge storyline all the time. But it's never a bigger storyline than when you have an unprecedented year like this year. Here's what I mean. I was talking to Steve Wiltfong the other day. We do the Wiltfong recruiting whip around. And I think he watches the show, so shout out Wiltfong in his brand spanking new office studio. And so he made a really good point the other day that I frankly had not thought of. He said, you know what? We've still got the early signing date coming up, and we still got the regular signing date coming up. But you know what we don't have? We don't have an official visit season. See, back in the spring, there were a bunch of commitments. There was a wave of commitments all over the place. And everyone assumed in the industry, oh, there's going to be a wave of decommitments in the fall once things open back up and kids are taking official visits, because a lot of kids are committing to programs that they've never been on the campus of. Well, things never open back up. Official visit season's not happening this year. And so what does that have to do with this game? Well, Steve goes on to say, tell you, the more I talk to kids, the more I talk to coaches, the more feedback I get from prospects, from their parents, since they can't go on official visits, and they're not having the general impression they would that would matter more than the outcome on the field, since they're not meeting the dean of the college they're going to enroll in, since they're not interacting with the head coach and his family, since they're not seeing the campus, since all those things aren't on the table, here's what is on the table: the outcome of games. You got a lot of kids, inevitably, that have Georgia and Florida in any given year, this one no different, in their list of finalists. Normally, the winner of this game, largely irrelevant to where a kid's going to go. This year, don't take my word for it. I'm telling you, Wiltfong does not lie about this stuff. It matters. The outcome matters. So you talk about a balance of power shift. Well, what if Florida were to win the game, and then they land two kids you didn't expect them to necessarily land, and they were finalists with Georgia for, and those kids on that signing day and a little bit thereafter go on record as saying, hey, man, I was convinced. When I saw Dan Mullen and that offense do some work against Georgia, that's what convinced me. That's the kind of stuff that you could talk about if you want to go overarching balance of power shift. I just want to remind you, again, I kind of showed you that we have a difference of opinion with Vegas on this game. I just want you to remember the core belief that has existed amongst Florida folks in relation to this rivalry. They look at the Georgia roster, and they say, we don't compare. Very few teams do, though. That's okay. Here's been the strategy. And their mentality has always been this: we're probably not going to out-recruit them until we beat them. And maybe even then we won't. Kirby Smart's one of the best in the world at recruiting, but we don't have to out-recruit them. Here's what we have to do. And if you're tuning in right now, as someone inevitably is, I am speaking in the shoes of a Florida fan, not assuming the role of one necessarily. I'm not being a homer on the air. Here is what they think. They've always thought if we can get a comparable roster, so we can just compete with the roster, we will out-coach them on game day. We'll out-scheme them. We'll out-execute them. We will outwork them on game day if we can get in the same ballpark. Now, here's the bonus. So they think they're there. Here's the bonus. The bonus is they got a really big quarterback edge this year that, I mean, maybe you expected somewhat at the beginning of the year, but you certainly, no one in the summer was saying Kyle Trask versus Stetson Bennett in Jacksonville. Who's got their tickets? I think that ticket would have been very popular in Gainesville. So this is the moment. This is the moment for Dan Mullen and Florida. At Georgia, here's another reason why it could be their moment. They're banged up, man. It kind of sucks that this is the spot Georgia's in. No one feels sorry for Georgia, and no one's asking you to feel sorry for him, to be honest with you. But Jordan Davis, I know that he's still questionable. I was reading Jake's stuff over on Dogs 24/7 today and just kind of texting back and forth with a couple other folks close to the program. I don't think Jordan Davis is going to be much of a factor Saturday, and he's a huge factor in a normal game week for Georgia. He's an interior disruptor. I mean, he can affect the quarterback. He can play a lot of different roles for Georgia. Probably won't be there. You know Richard LeCounte's not there, had the motorcycle wreck. So you're talking about two pivotal pieces right up the middle on different levels, of course, for that Georgia defense that either aren't there or aren't near 100%. Monty Rice going to give it a go. You don't necessarily know what you get from him. Quay Walker, it looks like, will be able to play. Julian Rochester probably out. So it's just, I'm not saying that they don't stand any chance of winning. They're favored. I mean, they're favored in the game. There's a reason they're favored. However, I think it adds a lot of emphasis on that little scale as you try and tilt it back and forth. When you hear Florida folks say it, we were talking about it in the preseason. It's no different now. This game has the exact tenor we thought it would. There is a ton of optimism around Florida, probably even more than I thought there would be. And then the second part is, as much optimism as there is, you've never seen a narrative shift more radically over a 3 or 3.5 hour period than it will if they can't get the job done against Georgia. And that's just the way it is, man. That's big boy college football. If you want to get to the top rungs of that ladder, it's very thin air up there, and there's a very fine margin between being a contender versus you've let us down. Man, this program ain't what I thought it was going to be. That could go one way or the other. Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Sunday when we're doing the show. I mean, we could be talking about radically different stories about Florida and the mood of the fan base over the span of just 4 quarters of football. How close? And when you think about Georgia's game against Alabama, like that's what everyone's drawing from because this is the next best passing attack that they will have faced since they faced Alabama. So I wonder, how close can Florida come to duplicating portions of that vertical passing attack that Alabama was able to establish? Because as much as I admire what Dan Mullen has done with Kyle Trask down there, I don't think they have the pure vertical passing threat in their passing game in general. I'm not saying they lack the speed, but in general, I don't think they have that to the degree that Bama does with Smith and Waddle. No one does. So how close are they to having that? How much yards after catch work can they do? You know, for instance, when you got Kyle Pitts, but then you got Tony, you got a lot of these other weapons, how many of those yards come after catch? Because a lot of them come in a normal Florida game. Here's the number 2 thing that could totally wreck this. The number 2 thing is, can you force anywhere close to a stalemate on the line of scrimmage? Or is this the kind of game where everyone's talking about quarterback, everyone's talking about wide receiver, and everyone's talking about these sort of ancillary things, but Georgia totally controls the line of scrimmage and renders a lot of it meaningless? Do we turn this game on and midway through the second quarter start texting each other or tweeting that, oh man, dude, Georgia's wrecking their offensive front. Oh man, look at the surge this Georgia offensive line's getting. That's what they're banking on. That's what they're banking on. But if it doesn't work out that way, and if by defensive scores, special team scores, just pure offensive scoring, if Florida grabs a 17-3 lead early, or at any point for that matter, how does Georgia play catch-up? There is a lot of talk about JT Daniels right now. There were a lot of folks that thought, hey, this is the game we'll probably see him. Well, I don't think that's happening. But I do wonder, like in lieu of that, what is the game plan to play catch-up? I was listening to Kirby Smart talk after that Kentucky game, And he was kind of vocal about, I see our offense in practice. I know that we can do some things, but hey, when we get in a game and we realize we're suffocating someone, i.e. Kentucky, we're probably not going to put our foot down on the floorboard too much. We don't have to. Well, here's how that translates to me. We've got it. We just don't need to show it all the time. I don't believe that. I flat out think that's incorrect. I don't think the Georgia offense possesses that right now. However, I've been wrong before, and I am willing to admit Kirby Smart knows his team just a little bit better than I do. So we'll see about that. And in Georgia terms, hopefully you don't have to see about that. But either way, here's what I can guarantee you, because I know both these teams pretty well, and I certainly know you guys. Sunday night will be entertaining. This show, Sunday night, certainly will be entertaining. That much is for sure.